Hello everyone, welcome to yet another day in the clown decade, the decade where things are only getting worse before they get better. And today we are looking at a video of Owen Jones going around the Tory party conference, expecting to find basically the same things he finds every time he goes to a Tory conference, which is finding a bunch of racists or right-wing cranks to interview, so that he can make the right-wing and Tory party seem absolutely crazy, and in the end makes himself look even crazier and make me realise that we truly are in clown decade, because he's probably going to make me want to vote Conservative again, just to make him even more mad. My politics at that point are truly that petty. This is what clown decade does to you. But on that note, we may as well see what the clown Jones has to say, so please take it away, Owen Jones.
Conservative Party conference, always a pleasure, never a chore. Now, this is probably the last conference before the next general election, which, if we're honest, this lot are likely to lose pretty badly as things stand.
That's true, and as far as I'm concerned, the Tories deserve absolutely every second of it. They have effectively been the party of Ed Miliband ever since David Cameron has been elected, carrying on the Blair and Brown legacy, implementing austerity in the worst way possible by only raising taxes and not actually cutting any spending, allowing all the institutions to keep going more and more woke, for lack of a better term, and even allowing huge factions inside the Tory party that, quite frankly, should just be part of the Liberal Democrats or even Labour. They should be known as the party of huge tax rises and huge spending rises. And while Labour have been attacking them on that front, Labour really aren't doing anything to cut taxes or cut spending. So your choice next election is either high taxes, high spending, slightly less wokery, or high taxes, high spending, and still having wokery, accelerated but pretending it's not happening.
Are they resigned to that? What do they think they've achieved in the last 13 years? Do they think the country's really better off?
A lot of them will probably try and claim that it is, and they'll probably actually have good reason to say that it is, because we have recovered better than most of Europe post-pandemic.
Culture wars, the veering off to the right, is that basically the future of this party?
It is quite funny that if you're on the defensive side of the culture war, i.e. you're on the side of let's get things back to kind of how they were in the 90s, but maybe with a bit less Russell Brand, then you're just a deranged right-winger. And trust me, if you don't know, one of the reasons I'm going through this is because of a particular clip on Twitter that was going about. So I'm hoping to find even more gold in this video that Owen put up.
Basically, I want to know, in the potentially dying days of a Conservative government, where the hell this lot are heading and what does it mean for the rest of us?
And you know what, Owen? I think that is a very good thing to do, because I'm interested to know exactly why you think they're going so wrong in the polls. I want to know why you think they're dying, and we can guess that off the questions that he asks. So let's get into it. He's entering the conference. Let's see what he has to say.
How do you feel things are going for the Tories at the moment?
Are they getting better?
Do you think they're getting better?
Definitely getting better, yes.
Not gonna lie, I'm kind of on this woman's side. When Sunak was appointed by the MPs leader of the Tory party and Liz Truss was kicked out, I was worried we were just going to have a permanent Labour light party, but to be fair to him, he's completely cut HS2. He's toying with the idea of cutting taxes, which is always welcome. In short, I thought the party was so bad, to be fair, that there probably was only going up from there. The bar was that low. Don't get me wrong, I'm still not planning to vote for the Tories next election, but you never know, when their manifesto comes out, I could be surprised.
What do the Conservatives stand for now? How do you sum up Conservative philosophy in 2023?
I would usually let the answer run, but I really just want to get in before he answers. Owen Jones has clearly picked this guy because he looks like a young Michael Gove. And I just wanted to point that out because it's really funny.
Economic incompetence.
Oh dear.
I know. It's not great, is it?
Now the thing is that absolutely everyone in the Tory party would agree with that. The problem is that there's two factions. The let's go more to the Labour 97 manifesto, and those heading towards the Let's Liz Truss This Entire Country manifesto. And it is absolutely impossible to tell which side of the fence this guy's on, because both sides would say, yes, there is economic incompetence in the Tory party, because some think for some reason we're going on the side of free market freakism, which not even Liz Truss is going to 80s style laissez-faire or Thatcheritism. However, she is definitely on the road to getting there. And then there's people like me who like to point out that it was under Sunak as the Chancellor where we've ended up with the highest tax burden and highest spending that we have seen in the country outside of wartime.
What are the Tories' proudest domestic achievements the last 13 years that you're proud of, that you've achieved?
Not much.
See, I can answer pretty confidently with this guy that he was probably on Truss's side. Because if you are a progressive or just a closet Blairite, you would have answers instantly. You'd say things like, ooh, gay marriage, ooh, the way they dealt with COVID, ooh, food banks have managed to feed quite a lot of the hungry. So let's hope he explains and let's hope I'm right.
Yeah.
Really?
There's nothing I can really say. I mean, Brexit-ish.
I mean, this guy isn't me, but this would pretty much be my answer if Owen Jones asked me this. Yeah, there's not an awful lot I've actually liked about what the Tories have done in the past 13 years. They have just been Labour light. At least they got Brexit done. But Brexit was done, and then one of the main reasons to vote for Brexit, which was immigration, that front was completely overturned by Boris Johnson, liberalising the visa system and liberalising the job advertisement system. Basically encouraging more non-EU immigrants to come over to the UK. Why would he do that? And the answer is because he is a closeted liberal.
Who would you like to take over from Rishi Sunak?
I don't know. Well, I've got all these things for New Conservatives. None of these are particularly in the running for the leadership.
Ian Duncan-Smith again?
No.
Jacob Rees-Mogg?
That'd be fun, but it's not likely to happen.
Would you think it'd be fun?
I think it'd be quite fun.
Would you vote for him?
I think so.
Seriously?
I think I might.
Do you think Tories would win under him?
No, but it's not like they're going to win under Rishi Sunak anyway, so, you know.
I mean, I can't disagree too much with this guy. Obviously, it's in the context purely of the next election, and my outlook on politics at the moment is trying to look about 10 years in the future, where effectively the Tories probably have to tactically lose and then just go full force, completely anti-Blairitism, effectively do what Thatcher did in the late 70s and 80s, completely overturn economic orthodoxy, the consensus. Obviously, it was the post-war consensus back in Thatcher's time. Today, it's overturning post-Keynesianism, or MNT, which we've effectively had since Blair's time. We've certainly had it since 2008, because that's when we started quantitative easing, which has effectively allowed the government to print money with extra steps to fund completely unproductive ventures, such as pension schemes, a completely overbloated civil service, and big infrastructure projects, which I'm not necessarily against, but with HS2, the plan needed to be slightly better. High-speed rail is absolutely fine. Having it so London-centric isn't so fine. So the Tories need to lose under Rishi Sunak, have another leadership challenge, and put someone like Kemi Badenoch in charge. Or anyone better. I am completely open to suggestions.
Scrapping HS2. Up yours to the north, really, isn't it?
It's not up yours to the north. It's a cost-effective solution. I supported it, but the cost has spiralled.
I mean, as someone who lives in the north and whose parents are or would be living about 5 minutes down the road from one of the new stations for HS2, and obviously I know people in that area because I grew up there, hardly anyone actually wanted it. A huge issue was, one of the main issues people had is that they were very aware that it would only take about 10 minutes off the route to London that you could get from Manchester Airport or Manchester Piccadilly anyway. It takes about 2 hours. HS2 I mean, would be about an hour and 50. And a pro-HS2 argument to counter that was to say, well, it's actually for capacity. And we do actually have a capacity problem with our railways. So when this guy says it's a cost-effective solution, it is true. They tried to save money early on in the project, and then the cost just spirals because you've cut corners early on, and now you need to pay for those cut corners. So what Rishi Sunak is going to do instead is upgrade railways in the north, and elsewhere as well, obviously, which should help relieve the capacity problem. Is it more cost-effective than carrying on HS2? Probably. I don't know. I'm not a railway expert. But to just say it's a bash against the north, it's just classic Owen Jones. Owen Jones is stuck in a 90s to early noughties mentality of leftist thought, and he's never grown up out of it. And this just becomes clear as he asks questions like that, where it's very confrontational. It's very, oh, you're a Tory, you hate the North, don't you? This is why you're getting rid of HS2. When in reality, at this point, as the guy says, loads of people supported HS2 in the Tory party. It's not like the 80s where Thatcher was trying to get rid of the wets. The Tory party is just brimming with people who should just be Liberal Democrats.
I think it's a nonsense.
What's a nonsense?
It's cancelling it.
Yeah, are you kind of angry about it?
I am. Yes, I am. I think it's just another example of perhaps, the North not receiving its dues.
Well, I'm just going to be honest. People in the North really didn't care about shaving 10 minutes off their train to London. And again, they're going to divert the money that would go to HS2 to upgrading railways all over the country. And that's probably actually going to benefit Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland as well. Really, in the long term, I think it is a winning policy.
People in Manchester are going to be pretty annoyed.
Yeah, I would be.
How would you feel if you were Mancunian?
Well, that's one thing. I mean, it depends on people's views on HS2, I suppose.
If you were Mancunian, do you think you'd be happy with that decision?
I'm not Mancunian.
Well, that's a man who would answer, but I had breakfast this morning. But having said that, he did answer that correctly. It does entirely depend on the individual Mancunian's opinion. And in fact, polling on HS2 consistently shows that people are effectively, they just don't care about it. HS2 isn't a huge issue, it's just all over the news all the time because of spiralling costs. So at this point, I'd actually wager that most people are actually quite happy that HS2 is being scrapped. I know I am, and when I head back to Manchester for a visit to my parents, I'll probably ask, what do you think of HS2? And I wager they'll probably be quite happy about it, because their favourite restaurant and gym will no longer be bulldozed for it.
I do think that the Conservative Party should certainly rethink the way forward, because the whole purpose of HS2 was to try to extend the successes in terms of economic wealth of the South to the north of England. It's not just about the railway, it's a lot bigger than that. It's not, so levelling up is not over at all.
London isn't massively wealthy and successful because of trains going through it, though obviously an underground does help. And Manchester has a decent public transport network, especially with the trams. But I'd wager the Tory party don't really understand why London is effectively the only place in the UK that is in surplus. And just saying the old tired levelling up, we're going to level up the north and things like that, doesn't help anyone because there's no clear path there. No one knows what the Department for Levelling Up does. No one knows what Michael Gove's done for the past 2 years.
Levelling Up's just a political slogan.
I mean, because why would anyone in Manchester vote for the Conservatives?
Working class people will, because working class people, many of them believe in solid Conservative values. They see the people who are sitting at home getting benefits and not doing any work.
I mean, he started quite strong with the levelling up's just a political slogan, it doesn't mean anything. Yes, that is true. And it also is true that the actual people in the working class who work generally do not like people who get their tax money because they don't feel like working, God bless them. But that's not why they won the Red Wall. That's not why working class people voted Conservative. A big reason genuinely is because of the push against wokery, because they want lower immigration, because they don't want their kids effectively being shown porn in the classroom at the age of like 5. But the problem is with this particular person who's answering at the moment, he doesn't seem to have accepted that the Tory party are way past having any cultural Conservative values. Really? I mean, yes, they throw red meat out every now and then with Suella Braverman saying there's going to be a hurricane of migrants that we need to stop and things like that. But there's a point where we need action rather than words, and it's been 13 years of words from the Tories when it comes to immigration and practically anything cultural.
Is that what you think's happening? You think people are sitting
Well,
we've got
5.7 million people of working age who are not working.
That is actually a ridiculous statistic when you think about it, because the population of the UK at the moment is about 66 million. Now, taking out all the elderly and retired people who can't work, and obviously all the people in education, you're probably looking generously at about 50 million people of working age in Britain who are out of education and all that. That's over 10% of people who could work who aren't working, assuming my estimations are accurate. Now, they're all not necessarily on out-of-work benefits, but it is quite an easy target for the Tories to aim at, because if there's one thing that does annoy the British more than anything, it's people not even attempting to do their part for society.
So you think people are falsely claiming benefits now because they're lazy?
Yes.
I mean, that obviously does happen. I don't know why Owen Jones tries to claim that people don't do that. But this guy isn't saying that all 5 million of those people out of work benefits are lazy. That's not what he said. But that's what Owen Jones is implying with that question.
Lee, how you doing?
Oh yeah, we got a proper job yet.
Well, that's a clip that's going to be repeated in this video.
Speaking of jobs, do you think it's appropriate for Tory ministers to have
State of you.
Tory deputy chair to have a GB News job? Shouldn't you represent your constituents?
Look here, Owen.
Yeah.
You know, all this complaining you do about my second job.
How much are you paid? How much are you paid a year?
It's 100 grand a year. You know how much I've paid? It's on my register of interest.
Right, do you think it's ridiculous that Tory politicians
Are you going to shut up and listen?
presenting-
You're going to shut up and
go
listen?
on, go on.
Shut your mouth and listen.
I have to say, I do like Lee Anderson. He knows that Owen Jones has come straight there to try and go on the attack. And so instantly his plan is just to undermine him as a journalist, and then point out that he's asking stupid questions. Like, why are you asking me how much I'm paid? You know how much I'm paid. Because, one, you're a journalist, and two, it's public information, so stop asking stupid questions. Which is why he then says to shut his mouth, because he will answer his fair questions respectfully. But obviously Owen Jones is trying to just throw question after question after question, and Lee Anderson is focusing on the fair questions to give fair answers. And in this case, it's the overarching question of should MPs have second jobs?
Oh,
so 45 grand of that goes back to the Treasury to pay for things like the NHS and public services.
And before he's even answered that question fairly by saying, I don't see the problem with MPs having a second job because of that 100 grand he earns from GB News, 45% of it goes straight to the Treasury to pay for public services. And Owen Jones is already asking a question before he's even finished that fair answer. Because as Lee Anderson knew straight away, Owen Jones wasn't there for a fair hearing. He was there to attack the chair of the Conservative Party.
You're moonlighting, not doing your job. Do you still think people using food banks are bad at budgeting?
I never said that.
You did?
No, I didn't.
So
you see, you haven't got the intellect or brains to understand what I said.
Again, I think this is a perfectly valid way to return fire to journalists who are clearly just there to attack you. Because it's true, it's not what Lee Anderson said. Lee Anderson said that in his food bank, in his constituency, they started a project of people who went to a food bank, were offered, and I think even had to before they could pick up a parcel, sign up for a budgeting course and a cooking course to teach them how to make a decent food budget and make decent and cook decent meals for, I think his budget was 30 pence a day. Which, if you're struggling to cook food, I don't know why you would be against that sort of thing. And if you want to help the poor, I don't know why educating them and giving them a free course on cooking cheap meals and budgeting for a week of food is a bad thing. I don't know why you'd be against that. Because it's a teach a man to fish sort of scenario. Yes, you can just give them food parcels again and again, but helping them actually out of the need to use food banks is probably better.
Why did
I said there are generations of people in this country who struggle to budget and cook, and that's true.
There's not this massive use for food banks in this country. We've got generation after generation who cannot cook properly, they can't cook a meal from scratch, they cannot budget. The challenge is there.
Thank you, Owen. You have just proved that he did say that.
We've got this culture now in some of these deprived areas where people now are so dependent on food banks, it's like a weekly shop for them.
Yeah, pretty much everyone I know who knows someone who uses a food bank has anecdotes of them. The one off the top of my head is my mum when she was visiting my grandma quite regularly at a care home. A couple of the nurses were using food banks, and yet on their lunch they'd pretty regularly get a Subway delivered, which is probably for a meal there to be delivered is, I don't know, you're looking at £7 to £8, which could quite easily cover the cost of about 3 hot meals if you do leftovers of say chili con carne or something like that, and would probably that would cover 2 meal deals from Tesco as well. So they're spending 2 or 3 days worth of food money in one lunch, and they were doing that pretty regularly. So yeah, I don't think a lot of people would disagree with Lee Anderson here.
We try not to eat a lot in one day, even though most of us are really hungry. We have to be careful with our food.
We go there because we don't have a lot of money to buy food and drinks. So that place is helping us a lot.
Of course, when you juxtapose that with this documentary of kids with the sad music over it saying, look at us, we're in poverty, we go hungry on some nights. Yeah, that's obviously going to make people not want to side with Lee Anderson. This is just Owen Jones playing to his audience. But the problem with kids is that they are really bad actors. Even the good child actors are typically quite bad actors. And this very much has the feeling of, this is what my parents have told me to say. Because if kids were regularly going hungry, especially at that age, they would absolutely look a lot more sad about it. They'd probably even cry about it.
Show me these kids that are in poverty. Bring me some, bring me some to my office.
I mean, that clip of the kids would have been better to put after that sentence, to be quite honest, but hey, I'm not your editor, Owen.
All right, Lee.
Bring some to my office.
Bring to your office.
Bring them to my office.
Okay. Is that how we have to prove people are in poverty?
Yes,
you have to
it is, because you haven't got a clue.
Have to take.
You just believe your own nonsense, what you pump out every day.
Well, I believe in objective statistics.
You're not important, Owen. You're not
I'm not important. You seem quite angry man, Lee.
I'm not angry.
You seem quite angry.
I mean, I think it genuinely is fair of Lee Anderson to say, look, please show me these people in poverty, because the thing with statistics is that they do get smudged. All poverty means in the UK at this point is that you're earning 60% of the median wage, which at the moment is just under £20,000. If you're earning just under £20,000, you're in poverty in the UK, because Blair and Brown smudged the statistics because we had already eradicated absolute poverty. And I also love how Owen then has to again go on the attack, because really Lee Anderson is right. Owen Jones does not have the sway he used to have. He just went off the rails after Corbyn got absolutely obliterated at the polls last election, and he's just been trying to find his feet again. And so obviously it's quite clear from his question that he came here to attack Lee Anderson, and so Lee Anderson's just like, well, I don't really care what you have to say, because you're not an important journalist anymore. All you really do now is write for The Guardian and make your own videos and do a couple of interviews a year. That's it. He effectively does as much as me in the political sphere.
Angry.
Not angry.
Take anger management lessons,
No. I'm quite...
Do you think it was a bit ridiculous you interviewed Suella Braverman? You're a Tory MP interviewing a Tory Home Secretary.
I'll tell you what's ridiculous. You walking around here dressed like that. Why don't you smart yourself up?
Again, another pointless political attack from Owen Jones. Why were you, a Tory MP, interviewing another Tory MP on GB News? When I don't even know why Ofcom would have a rule against that. There's been plenty of Labour conferences where MPs talk to other MPs and it's televised or put onto YouTube or things like that. So yeah, Lee Anderson just replies with Owen, frankly, you should just be embarrassed with yourself.
I feel relaxed.
That's
I feel
ridiculous.
relaxed. I mean,
Anyway.
you keep talking about my clothes.
Anyway, you want to come in here?
Where are you going?
I do love the security guard with a little smile on his face there. He invited you in, but it's obvious that was sarcasm. You're not coming in, Owen. I have to say, I do like Lee Anderson's antics. Is it the type of behaviour I'd want from a chair of the Conservative Party? Not particularly. I think it should be quite a bit more professional when answering the questions, but what is quite funny is that this is quite typical banterish behaviour that is also quite typical of the working class, and Owen Jones is renowned for writing a book about the demonisation of the working class, and then all he tries to do is degrade him for his typical working class responses of undermining Owen while he himself is being attacked. He's doing it actually in quite a graceful way, to be honest. But Owen's just never going to let up, and Lee Anderson knows that. So, as I say, would I expect a bit more professionalism? Probably, but I am very much entertained by it, so, I'll let it slide.
13 years of Tory rule, how has Britain been changed for the better compared to 2010? What are you most proud of?
Ultimately, it hasn't changed. I mean, I think that it's changed for the worse. We see the highest tax burden since the Second World War. We have soaring house prices. The government have been unable to reform the planning system, which means that we're unable to afford our own homes. So, ultimately, I don't think things have changed for the better.
I have to say, I do love how the answer to things are getting worse under the Tories are things that Owen Jones would actually be in favour of, i.e. higher taxes, higher spending, and keeping the private planning sector very restrictive so that the private sector can't expand, because Owen Jones just wants social houses or council houses for everyone.
What are you most proud of that the Tories have achieved since 2010 in terms of making Britain a better place?
Since 2010, I think educational standards have improved vastly.
Right.
I mean, somehow, apparently, yes, we are quite high on the scale of education. This is despite the fact that something like 1 in 4 children who've reached the age of 11 aren't at their expected literacy rate, and something like 1 in 5 children taking maths GCSE fail it. Somehow, despite that, we are still pretty regularly in the top 10 rankings for worldwide education. So fair enough, but honestly, an awful lot of our curriculum can be vastly improved, especially with, say, history, because we really do learn nothing in history. It's basically all World War II and the Tudors.
Loads more schools are better or outstanding. reading standards are much better for children.
Again, probably true on the world stage, but we vastly need to improve education standards still. I mean, I know Rishi Sunak is wanting kids to learn maths up until they are 18 and leaving school, but when a fifth of them are failing at GCSE, the problem obviously isn't that they're not learning maths until they're 18. Obviously, the problem's when they're much younger.
And health service funding is a lot better. I know you're going to talk about the waiting list.
Well, I mean, that's quite key, isn't it?
Yeah.
Record waiting list for the NHS. It's kind of on its knees, I think, isn't it?
That could be a problem with the NHS as a system, though. But I don't want to get into that.
What do you want to do to the
I don't want
NHS?
to get. No, I love the NHS.
Do you want to privatise the NHS?
Absolutely not.
I wouldn't be shocked if he wants a Bismarck system, but this is a man, this young Michael Gove, absolutely knows that you are only shooting yourself in the foot if you try and say anything about changing the NHS toward any sort of system that doesn't put full control under the government, because people are crazy about the NHS.
Liz Truss, she's back.
Well, there was much rejoicing from me.
But she's popular. I mean, people are packing out the room for her.
Concerning. No idea what. That's actually... I mean, we were going to go at one point kind of for the joke.
But obviously, for some reason, these kids want to carry on the Blair Brown legacy. I mean, again, these are people, frankly, that should just be part of the Liberal Democrats, but the Tories keep allowing them in because they want that huge broad church. And I think it is important to have the broad church, but it gets a bit unfortunate when one particular faction is quite clearly, completely taking over the party, and that faction are effectively Liberal Democrats.
I think in theory, Liz Truss, I think, has a lot of really good stuff about her. She talks a very strong case. I think when it came to the delivery, we found that there was frailties in that.
Which I have gone through over and over again on this channel. At this point, I am pretty much fully on board with the idea that it was complete sabotage by the Bank of England, because they just didn't tell the Treasury about the LDIs, the liability-driven investments, which is pretty much entirely what the Bank of England have been using to fund pensions. And the problem is, if you throw a spanner in the bond market, as Liz Truss did, because she was effectively trying to get us back into a state of historical norms and get away from quantitative easing, it caused a huge issue with these liability-driven investments, caused a huge market uproar, and quite frankly, she said plenty of times in interviews, if she and the cabinet knew about that, they would have taken a different tact. They would have understood that it was a bad thing. But how are you supposed to compromise with something that you don't even know exists? So I think it's perfectly valid to actually defend Liz Truss, and I would do if I was at this Tory conference. But, you know, I've got to work, man.
And I think it was moved too fast. But actually, what she says and about how she positions herself, I think is actually really quite straightforward and appeals to a lot of Conservatives.
Well, yeah, it absolutely does, because her whole idea is just to take us effectively back to Thatcherism, which saw such vastly and incredible positives for the country that it's actually quite amazing that people are against it. But the fact of the matter is that some people like Owen Jones actually do just hate the idea of people being better off than them. When Owen Jones says the working class, the working class, the working class, he includes himself in that cohort, despite the fact that he out-earns probably 75% of the people in the country.
I don't think she should be apologising rather than saying she's, you know, her ideas are correct.
She should be apologising.
No, wrong. It's the Bank of England that should be apologising to her. It is the Tory party and the HQ that should be apologising to her, because she probably reacted in the best way that she could to the whole situation around her. She lost pretty much all political capital once the mini-budget was put out and the markets went a bit haywire because of a massive spending plan, which, okay, that obviously could have been planned a bit better. It should have been means tested. But I think this is the biggest tragedy of the Liz Truss era. It has made ideas that I fully back political kryptonite. And I truly wish that I could blame Liz Truss, but I think with going through the entire situation quite meticulously on the channel and seeing her post the entire ordeal, going into interviews and doubling down saying, look, I didn't do an awful lot wrong. I couldn't have known about this because the Bank of England kept it from me. I have to say I'm on her side. I do quite like her tenacity. To have the entire media landscape, everyone in Normiville completely against her, and still say, actually, I didn't do anything wrong. Like, that earns crazy respect from me.
I think she's got a brass neck to be here. I mean, when you think about it, a year ago she was on the main stage, Prime Minister, now she's in some side room. You think, well, You've got to have some balls to do that, haven't you, really? Or to be totally in denial.
She was the she won the members' vote. She is the most popular Prime Minister with the members. I still remember going to a Tory party forum to talk about the future of capitalism and what's going to be in the next Tory manifesto, and pretty much everyone there was on side with Liz Truss, apart from one guy who started off by saying, oh, it was a ridiculous plan, and then when everyone else basically said, no, it isn't, it was pretty good, it was the LDIs and all that, he went, okay, maybe it just needed some tweaking then. Like, he had to concede that it wasn't terrible. She was the member's choice. Of course she's going to come to the Tory party conference where there's going to be thousands of members. And again, she isn't in denial at all. She understands what went wrong, and she understands what she needs to do differently next time. That's good. I wouldn't mind that as a Prime Minister, but I don't think she should ever be Prime Minister again just because of how much political capital she lost. It needs to be someone else. Someone on her side, obviously, but someone who can sell her vision much better.
How you doing?
Hello.
Would you say you've taken over the Conservative Party now? Why not just join them? You've taken over.
Join them?
Yeah.
What would I agree with them on?
Well, what do you disagree with them on? You've basically taken them over.
You tell me what they stand for, and I might give you an answer.
Well, yes, for those of you who don't know, Nigel Farage has made it to the Tory party conference. As the clips I've cut out said, last time he was at one was sometime in the 80s in Bournemouth. Obviously when Margaret Thatcher was Prime Minister, because Nigel Farage is a fully blown Thatcherite. The man used to work as a trader in the city, and obviously went into politics and left the Conservative Party because of their stance on joining the European Union, and then became one of the most successful politicians in Britain. If he joined the Tory party and got a high up position, ended up in the cabinet even, you would probably unironically see a massive wave of Tory voters. I would vote for the Tories if Nigel Farage ended up as Home Secretary or something like that. However, I think he would actually be much better off outside of Parliament and pressuring them from the outside. I think that's where his major successes in politics came from. The man effectively single-handedly made a single-issue party and got us Brexit. Now, was it a good Brexit? No. And that's the whole reason that he is still in politics. That's probably part of the reason he has gone to the Tory party conference.
What do you mainly disagree with them now politically? On immigration, they've taken your policies on.
What you mean? Well, I mean, we've got higher levels of legal immigration today than ever before. And we wonder why we can't get GP appointments.
Is Suella Braverman basically a Faragist, though? Where do you think, would you disagree with her in any big substantial issue?
Well, no, I think she agrees with me in a very large way.
You've taken over the Conservative
Party.
Well,
there may be a wing of the Conservative Party that agrees with me, but equally there's perhaps an even bigger wing inside Parliament that would disagree with me.
And this right here is the thing that Owen Jones constantly fails to understand. It's a broad church. There are wings of the Tory party, and the biggest one are basically Lib Dems, as we constantly keep saying over at the Wellington Project, as anyone who supports Liz Truss constantly says. Yes, the members overwhelmingly wanted Liz Truss. The problem is that those with power in the Conservative Party pulling the levers got her kicked out and got Rishi Sunak in, because they're on board with 90% of the rest of the blob. Obviously not in the Home Office, because the Home Office are absolutely on board with open door policy, presumably because it gives them less work. But when it comes to keeping taxes high and keeping spending high, now why would the Home Office, well, not even the Home Office, but why would all of the civil servants be in favour of higher taxes for higher public spending? I can't think why they would be on board with that.
If Suella Braverman becomes leader, will you join the Conservative Party?
Gosh, I left them a long time ago.
I know, but would you rejoin if she was leader?
I would. Do you know what? If she was leader, I would at least believe in some of the policies.
Right.
Would I trust them to deliver on them?
Interesting.
I don't know.
And Nigel Farage, especially, is speaking for me, but I think speaks for an awful lot of the country. I think that's why he is a very popular politician, all in all, and why he's very unpopular with other people, especially the new elite, because he is a lightning rod for everyone who is against the new elite. He is, for lack of a better term, the voice of them. I don't know a lot of people who agree with me politically who would disagree with anything Farage has said here.
Are you going to stand across the board against Conservative candidates?
Well, I'm only the honorary president. You know, I have no really active role, but that is Richard Tice's intention, yeah.
Okay.
And yes, obviously, the problem with that at the moment is that Nigel Farage is an honorary president of Reform, but he's really got no active role in it. If he had more of an active role in it and came out next election standing for an MP, you never know. A lot of Tory voters might go over to Reform. Now, yes, it would give the Labour Party free rein over Parliament because, my God, that would completely destroy the Tory party. But my God, that would be excellent incentive for those in power in the Tory party to then say, okay, maybe we need Liz Truss back in the cabinet somewhere, and we basically just let Nigel Farage run the show behind the scenes while he's still on GB News. That would probably be the best thing for the Tories to do if they want to win an election again.
And if that means a Labour government, how do you feel about that?
And what would the difference be?
There's no difference between Conservatives and Labour.
They're two Social Democrat parties. There's almost no difference.
Social Democrats?
They're both Social Democrat parties. Okay. They're both big state, high tax, high immigration.
So Rishi Sunak's a raging lefty, as far as you're concerned.
He's a centrist Social Democrat. He's socially more conservative, perhaps, than Boris Johnson was, or some other previous leaders. But on the really big stuff, there isn't much to choose, and that's the truth of it.
And Owen Jones is so stuck in the 90s and noughties that he just cannot see that. As soon as David Cameron became leader of the Tory party, that's it. Both sides were just Blairite. And that has been the case, apart from a blip with Corbyn, ever since. Nigel Farage is absolutely right, and this is supposed to be the point of reform. But the problem with reform is that Richard Tice just is not a charismatic man. And genuinely, I see some reform placards, I see some reform TikToks or people who are pro-reform, and they can't tell me any of their policies. It's all vibes. And the thing is that the vibe that they're all going for is just, oh, well, they're not Labour or Tory. But you need a bit more than that to get your swing voters on board. You need to say, look, we will put immigration to net zero. We will go even further than Rishi Sunak and reduce green subsidies so that we don't have to have taxes so high. Just go on and on and on about that, things that are fairly popular. Because realistically, the SDP are the ones that should be absolutely ruining election day because they are very right-wing culturally and very left-wing economically, and that, I constantly am told, is what the centrist in Britain wants. I actually don't believe that. I think that's their stated preference. But I think at the end of the day, what people actually want is for less influence from huge businesses and banks over their lives, less influence from government over their lives, while being able to not have to worry about affording healthcare. That's essentially all people want. Well, that and obviously hang nonces and have a tougher justice system. But to put it down to, oh, basically the SDP should win every time, that would be happening if that were true, I'm afraid.
One thing for certain is a rapidly rising population is diminishing the quality of life in this country. And that absolutely I have no
Because you get people who come here, they work, they pay taxes, they pay into the economy, that's a good thing.
A rapidly rising population diminishes the quality of life for everyone.
So we need to get rid of these foreign doctors and nurses?
Well, what we need to do is keep our own.
Right.
We train them at public expense and they go off to Australia and elsewhere.
Yes, and part of the reason for that is that Australia does not have an NHS-style system. Basically nowhere else in the world does, especially in the Western world, because it doesn't work. If it was the envy of the world, people would try and emulate it. Nowhere else in the world does. Everywhere has tried to emulate the German system, the Netherlands system, because those are systems that work, and they are systems with quite high proportions of private hospitals. Because the market, it just works. And obviously, if you can, you are obviously going to try and leave the NHS, because it probably is underpaying nurses, it probably is underpaying doctors. But with absolutely everything, every cost ballooning due to inflation, it's just not affordable. Scrapping HS2 is probably going to cover the cost of the NHS for a few days. It is that much to keep running.
That's because we're not paying them properly. That's because we're not paying them properly.
I mean, I repeat the point.
Do you think we should pay them?
A rapidly rising population has diminished people's quality
But we need to pay
of
our That's an example. We pay our doctors. Do you support a 35% increase of return back to 2010?
We should indenture them.
Indenture them?
Yeah. If we put public money into training people who work in the NHS...
But you force doctors to stay in the country whether they want...
for a minimum, should give us some years back. Absolutely.
Now, this is actually something that Owen Jones would more than likely actually agree with if it wasn't coming out of Farage's mouth. This is obviously just a reasonable policy. The public is training you. How is it fair that as soon as your training is done, you head off over to Australia to benefit Australia rather than Britain? How is that fair? And Owen Jones isn't wrong. If you paid them more, they probably would be more likely to stay. But as we've gone through, that isn't affordable, and this is also part of the reason we have to constantly get foreigners in, because they are willing to be paid less while not improving productivity at all. And so because of that, there's no actual economic growth. It's all being extracted to Australia, at least in the health sector.
Are you genuinely suggesting that British doctors should be forced to stay here? against their
For
will.
a period of time, if we're putting public money into them, absolutely.
Do you not think a better way around rather than depriving them of their freedom? Do you not think we should just pay them a proper wage, then they'll start going to Australia?
Rather than depriving Mali and countries like that, who probably need those doctors and nurses more than we do, no, there's a lot more we can do with this.
I mean, it's another classic anti-immigration talking point that I'm fully on board with. Yeah, we are taking a lot of doctors from places that, just like us with the NHS, can't keep them. Probably again because of the wage problem. This all actually comes back to, I understand Farage's policy. I think it would be a popular one. But overall, it would just be better to just completely redesign the NHS from the ground up. Make it a lot more like the Bismarck system in Germany, because that one just works. And it's going to take over a decade to get to that point. The NHS is just that bloated. But overall, it would solve so many issues because academic agent's old idea of the NHS is what is going to bring in socialism is absolutely correct, because we can't have any freedom in this country. We can't see junk food adverts on the tube or on TV. I think that's still actually a policy that's incoming. Smoking is going to be banned for everyone from the age of 16 in a New Zealand style. If you were born in the year 2010 or something like that, you will never ever be able to buy tobacco. Just absolutely crazy nanny state ideas, nanny state taxes and nanny state subsidies, all down to the NHS, because we need to save as much money as possible by not giving people lung cancer, by reducing the risk of people needing to use it, which is the complete opposite of what you should be doing with a health system. But it is unfortunately the religion in our country. Who would have thought that the death of Christianity in Britain would mean that the NHS becomes the golden calf?
So instead of paying doctors a proper wage, keeping up with inflation, we should force them to stay here.
Actually, once they're qualified, they're earning a lot of money. A lot of money. Right. I'll see you later.
Cheers, Nigel.
Yeah, junior doctors earn more than me when it comes to their average starting wage. It's anywhere between about £35,000 and £65,000, and that's just for basic pay. You add another £5,000 on for when they are actually doing their first year of practice. So yeah, it is actually quite a lot of money. Should it be more? I don't know. Probably. We can't tell because it's a total monopoly with the NHS. But good talk there from Jones and Farage. That is clearly Farage being as polite as he can about the whole thing, while Owen is clearly just trying to get him in gotchas that don't quite pull off, because Owen Jones isn't very good at them.
Obviously, we served under David Cameron. The Tories have gone through quite a few iterations since then. What does being a Conservative stand for in 2023? What's the philosophy?
2023 is always got to be about serving the country, not becoming terribly dogmatic, allowing yourself to be taken over by extremists.
Would you like Suella Braverman, you mean?
Owen Jones just cuts at that bit, so we don't know if he said yes or no, but this is Eric Pickles, who was an MP under David Cameron, who, by the way, said pretty much the same thing that Suella Braverman said, but obviously, since they are Blairites, they had to constantly shift leftward like Cthulhu. And so, hopefully, we find out whether we can estimate whether he said, yes, Suella Braverman is an extremist or not, despite the fact that Suella Braverman just agrees with 2010 David Cameron.
How does a gay refugee prove they're gay? That's what Suella Braverman talked about.
I mean, I have a view about this, and I think that neither the Conservative Party nor the Labour Party have got the answer to this at all. I think we've become obsessed by the pull factor. And I think we need to give a little bit of thought to the push factor. Why are these people risking their lives? Why are they wanting to travel?
Because we got rid of safe and legal routes for the vast majority of the world.
And what we need to be able to do is to ensure that the people don't need to do that travel, that they have a better life.
So you want safe and legal routes to be expanded?
Well, we need to ensure, what Suella Braverman is offering is a safe and legal route in Rwanda so that they can be processed off country.
That means that...
I mean, that was a very annoying, I'm not going to directly answer your question, because, I mean, the whole point of the, how is someone supposed to prove if they're gay or not? I mean, that's our point. You can't prove it or not, so people can just say it to try and game the system, which is our entire problem. But then Eric Pickles makes the decent point of, look, if you want a safe and legal route, just go to Rwanda, we'll process you there. Anyone can go there and do it when the plan is implemented, but obviously Owen Jones and his entire cohort, completely against that idea. Why? I couldn't actually tell you, because it's racist or something, because there should just be open borders. That's their issue. The borders aren't open, and for some reason they don't think people will risk their lives to get free money, despite the fact that people do stupid things on reality TV all the time to get free money. And despite the fact that crossing the English Channel when it isn't a windy day is actually a fairly safe thing to do.
Deported permanently to Rwanda.
No, they're not. No, it doesn't mean that. No, it doesn't mean that.
That's what the Rwanda scheme means. It doesn't mean they go there then come back.
No, the Rwanda scheme means that they are protest of country.
Yeah, and they stay in Rwanda.
I'm certain about that.
Yeah, and they stay in Rwanda. They're not allowed to come back to Britain after that.
I mean, Owen Jones is technically right here. They are sent to Rwanda, but the thing is that they're sent to Rwanda and processed there, and then they have the choice to stay in Rwanda as a refugee. They're in a safe country. They are being treated as a refugee as they would here. I don't really understand why it's a problem. I don't understand why Owen Jones is so desperate to keep them here. It's a very, very confusing set of events. And I can understand the confusion here because I just did a whole segment thinking that Eric Pickles was right. He's actually not. I've misremembered this policy, which probably explains why Eric Pickles is such a deer in the headlights in this segment.
The process of them being processes, there is a possibility of them coming back.
There isn't. That's not how it works. The Rwanda scheme means they permanently stay in Rwanda. You must know that.
I don't know that. No, I don't think it's right.
That's the policy of the Conservative Party.
The policy of the Conservative Party is to be able to look at applications off country.
Do you honestly think? Sorry, do you think the policy is they go to Rwanda, then they're processed, then they can come back to Britain?
I mean, I don't know why again, Owen Jones, you're so desperate for them to stay in Britain. I don't understand why you are so desperate for that. Because the thing is that if a lot of them aren't genuine refugees, then sending them to Rwanda is fine because they can apply for immigration status or a visa to stay in Rwanda there if their application fails, as it should here, because they're probably pretty similar processes because they are both based on the UN's own criteria for becoming a refugee. So what's your problem here?
Do you not know that? I'm genuinely curious.
Well, I mean, I don't know why you're so aggressive.
I'm not aggressive, I'm just confused you don't know the policy.
I mean, as I said before, I can understand why you got confused at the policy because I thought that was the policy as well. Hence, I'm having to redo this bit. But Eric Pickles really doesn't need to deflect by trying to say, oh, you're being very aggressive, because to be honest, he's not being particularly aggressive. And really, if you're in the House of Lords and you're supposed to be reviewing these policies, you should probably know what's in the policies.
The idea is to be able to process these off country and to be able to ensure that there isn't a pull factor across the.
But they're permanently deported to Rwanda.
Well, no one's gone yet.
No.
Yes, Eric Pickles is also the type of person to answer, but I did have breakfast this morning. But yeah, that is a perfectly reasonable push factor. Did Denmark do it? Australia do it? I don't see the problem with it. Send them to a third country. They can then get processed as a refugee there. And if it fails, then they have the other option of applying for a visa there. We shouldn't have that option because we're already touching upon 1 million migrants a year. Gross. And generally, even first-generation immigrants don't want that. And second-generation immigrants keep going into the Home Office saying that they're going to do something about it.
I know the scheme's not working, clearly, and it's been ruled to be illegal. So, but in any case, it isn't about them going to Rwanda and being processed and coming back to Britain. That's not
I mean, it is pretty wild that Australia and Denmark do this exact policy, and for some reason, when Britain do it, it's deemed illegal. I mean, that just goes to show how absolutely mental the UK legal system is and the international treaties we are part of are. Hence the reason that Suella Braverman keeps pointing them out as targets.
Will be processed in Rwanda.
And they're then left in Rwanda.
What is your problem with that, Owen? You need to tell us that. Anyway, the interview ends there. We get no answers from it. That was a pretty poor interview, mainly because of Eric Pickles, to be fair. He had the perfect opportunity to steamroll Owen Jones, and he just didn't take it.
Hey, Dana, would you like to vox pop? Oh, wait.
I've just checked the scheme. I was right.
No, you're not.
No, I am right.
They don't get to come back.
If their application is approved, they do.
No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
They don't, Eric.
They do.
They don't.
I've just checked the scheme.
Right, okay. We will check. That's not true. That's not true. The scheme does not allow people to come back. They're having a new life in Rwanda. That's the point.
If they don't pass the application.
No, if their application, then they stay in Rwanda. Yes.
Check the scheme.
Eric, I've checked the scheme over and over again. Ian Dale found this out on national radio when he was being interviewed about it, and he exclaimed his surprise and shock because he thought it meant people got to come back to Britain. They were just being processed offshore.
I mean, I would love to find out where this confusion has come from because, to my knowledge as well, that is how it worked. And I've covered this scheme in quite a few videos, so I have no idea how there's been this Mandela effect on this. But I can't particularly blame Eric Pickles for it, because I have the same problem, but I'm literally... Here's what the UK government say. The asylum partnership arrangement, and it clearly quite says, the asylum arrangement allows the UK to send some people to Rwanda who would otherwise claim asylum in the UK. Rwanda will consider them for permission to stay or return to their country of origin, but they will not be eligible to return to the UK. So that is the scheme. I don't know where Eric Pickles has seen this one where they will return to the UK as refugees, but it must exist unless everyone's just got this Mandela effect. Because there are far too many people who have thought that the Rwanda scheme meant that the refugees come back. I mean, honestly, I need a sanity check on this. Can all you in the comments please let me know if you understood the asylum policy, the Rwanda scheme, to be how me and Eric Pickles are saying it, in that they return to the UK if they're genuine refugees, or if you understood it correctly and we're on Owen Jones's side here, because I need to know. And I'd also love to know if anyone in the comments knows what Lord Eric Pickles checked there, because he is pretty certain that he was correct that they come back to the UK, so it must exist. It must do.
Suella Braverman, do you think she's right when she says immigration is an existential threat to the West?
For those of you wondering, this is a woman who absolutely wants to say yes, but really can't be bothered with an argument from the boy Jones. That's all that reaction is.
Multiculturalism, Suella Braverman said, had failed. Do you agree with that?
Again, this is just another time that it should just be a Chad yes, but he really can't be bothered talking to a leftist moron about why. Because they just can't understand why. They are incapable of it, because their values they don't have any sort of mindset for understanding traditional values, because Owen Jones is just a full-on progressive at any cost type guy.
Yes. Why has it failed?
I think that we have many... Well, no, what's the best way of phrasing this?
This is the problem. The whole conversation is so tied up by the leftist paradigm that even if you say very basic things such as, look, there's quite clearly ethnic conflict all about, just look at Leicester, and second and third generation immigrants are murdering each other at quite high rates, you can't just say that, because then they'll go, oh, they're not all doing that though. Which isn't the point. And I have to say is a pretty dismal way of trying to back out of the argument of has immigration created a multicultural paradise or not? Because the answer's obviously no, but idiots and leftists like Owen Jones constantly, just like the alt-right by the way, conflate race and culture. Carl Benjamin was absolutely right that leftists are just white supremacists with a guilty conscience, because that's all Owen Jones is.
When mismanaged, immigration can cause lots of problems.
See what I mean? He wants to, probably anyway, he probably wants to say some of the points that I brought up, but as soon as you start saying that, you'll just get called a racist, you will be shunned from polite society. It's hard to put your name and face behind things that I've said, hence I do this anonymously. And it's a damn shame, because it means we can't... It's basically impossible to have an honest conversation about it. Suella Braverman's doing a good job of bringing it to the forefront, but it's hard to openly give your support, as Owen Jones is clearly showing, but he's not questioning any of that, because his bigoted assumption is just that these people are closet racists, when they're not.
I wouldn't put it in those words. I know Suella Braverman, and I have high regard for her. I do think that the Refugee Convention needs to be looked at because it's old.
A lot of these answers are all pretty similar. They're all wishy-washy, maybe she is being a bit extreme about it, but I think the main reason for that is that really all these people agree with Suella Braverman. But the thing is that if they say that directly into a microphone with their face in this video, they know that the underlying threat is that they are going to get doxxed and lose their job. They know that is a very, very real threat.
Actually, I think it was Phil who pointed out to me that the democracies are certainly a minority on this particular planet that we live on.
But what's the evidence that people coming here from different cultures don't accept democracy?
I think there's evidence in plenty.
You need to give slightly more detail than that. I mean, overall, like democracy is a bit of a misnomer. When people say that, all they really mean is quite liberal values, and even relatively conservative people like me are very, very liberal compared to the rest of the world. Like, democracy is just one touchstone of the culture of Britain, and even that's relatively young. That's only really been, especially because when people say democracy, they just mean universal suffrage. That's only really been a thing since World War I. So yeah, people will come over, and when they are eligible to vote, they will vote, but the reason for that isn't necessarily because they believe in democracy, it's more because they want to have influence over the democratic system. They're not necessarily pro-democracy just because they vote. But if you have the chance to constantly vote in people that you like, why wouldn't you take it?
I'm not prepared to say.
Oh, I mean, it's just
I refuse to say.
You refuse to say which cultures aren't accepting democracy in Britain?
I think most people understand what I'm referring to.
Who?
Well, I don't wish to be drawn on the subject. Okay?
This is a woman who understands that Owen Jones is literally just here to call her a racist at any opportunity he can, so she's just not giving him the option. The problem is that if you're ever going to say that dog whistling exists, you would use a clip like this. But the great examples to use are just the grooming gang scandal, because pretty much every single person convicted in that grooming gang scandal basically admits that they were doing it to specifically white and Sikh girls on ethnic lines because of ethnic reasons. Look at Leicester with the upheaval that they all had between the Hindu and Muslim communities. Look at boroughs in London, as some guy is going to bring up later, where you just have entire foreign colonies taking over places like Tower Hamlets and places wherever Callum went when he did his tourism round Merry Old England video. And it's like, you know, okay, some of these areas, yes, they can be perfectly peaceful, but I think it's also reasonable to say that, especially if you're Owen Jones, who says that colonialism during the Empire days was bad, can also understand that having colonialism in the modern day is bad. But he's a white supremacist with a guilty conscience, so anything that undermines British people, or white people in general, he sees as a good thing, because it's a race to equality, and he thinks white people are just better. I don't. But Owen does, and that's why he's on that side of things. That's why he goes with those vibes. That's why he wants to call these people racist, but they're not giving him the opportunity, because they know how the game's played.
Nigel Farage, what do you think about him?
Well, you can't deny the effect he's obviously having on this conference. I mean, you know, I'm someone who, you know, even back in 2019, you know, I would have, in the European elections, I would have voted for the Conservative Party, not the Brexit Party. But you can't deny the impact he's had on the modern-day Conservative Party.
In what way? What's he done to the Conservative Party?
Well, obviously, you know, he's what caused the referendum. That's the reality.
I don't know why leftists are always so shocked when it's just generally accepted that Nigel Farage is one of the most successful politicians of the modern day. I know it's simply because they have a visceral hatred for him, but my God. I do think it's mad how, just as Owen Jones has done there, he almost seems confused as he's asking that question of how has he affected policy, though? When it's obvious to anyone who's politically engaged. I don't know why it's just not widely accepted.
I mean, he transformed the Conservatives, let's be honest. He did change the Conservatives.
Well, I'm not sure that's strictly true. You've always had... The Conservatives have always been a very broad tent. You've always had factions within it. Look as far back as Enoch Powell. Yeah. You know, I'm not necessarily comparing the two, but there's always been one end of the party and another end of the party.
Yeah, this is true. I mean, when we say Nigel Farage transformed the party, it is kind of true. All he did was give more power to the dry Tories, the Thatcherites in the party, the anti-immigration lot in the party. But at least Owen Jones is finally coming around to accepting that.
Well, Powell be pretty happy with some of the things Suella Braverman was saying.
Oh, I wouldn't comment on that.
What do you think of Enoch Powell?
I mean, the guy's laughing here because it's obviously just such a gotcha question. Because if you say anything along the lines of, he was the single best politician we've ever had, which as far as my analysis of the man goes is completely true, obviously it just goes straight to Rivers of Blood. What about Rivers of Blood? He was a big racist though, wasn't he? He hated Indians, even though he spoke Urdu to his Indian constituents. But that's because, again, it's all vibes based. All people know about Enoch Powell is the Rivers of Blood speech, and in reality he was completely different to absolutely any racist skinhead that you can think of. I genuinely think that's why leftists hate him, because he is probably one of the single biggest geniuses that Parliament has ever seen, and he isn't on the leftist side at all. And so they have to completely destroy him for that, despite the fact that pretty much every policy he supported was probably the correct path, with some contested claims on that, such as being against Trident and being against the death penalty. Obviously, a lot of Conservatives wouldn't be on board with that, but hey, he made very good arguments against them both, so fair enough.
Well, I'm not too brushed up on my history, but from what he said, I'm not too sure.
Right. What he said, all that people know that he said is Rivers of Blood. Everyone needs to just read his Wikipedia page. Their minds will be blown just by Enoch Powell's Wikipedia page. The man did more by the time he was 25 than most people do by the time they're 60. It's just crazy.
What do you think, Enoch Powell?
Ian Powell's obviously a very divisive figure.
Yeah. What do you think of him, though?
Personally, what I think of him is a lot of stuff he was saying, although very divisive at the time, has come to pass.
What?
Here we go, finally. A based and open man at the Tory party conference. This is the moment we've been waiting for. I hope this was worth the hour wait.
Rivers of blood?
Not yet, no.
No, but do you think...
Well, again, I've said this over and over and over. The quote is, obviously I'll sum up the rest of it. If mass immigration continues, what Enoch Powell says, I, like the Roman, have visions of the River Tiber foaming with much blood. And obviously the point is that being an avid reader of history, Enoch Powell knew that if you have many ethnicities in one place, you're obviously going to get conflict. And I'm completely on Carl Benjamin's side when he made the speech at the Dankula March, asking, well, how many stabbings does it take to fill a river with blood? Because London knife crime's still a huge issue. We saw it just last week. A 15-year-old girl was stabbed by a boy with a machete because she rejected his flowers. Now, I'm obviously not saying that English people are incapable of it, but what I am saying is that the text by the boy, which I have on screen here, to his friend explaining that he just stabbed a 15-year-old girl, would be probably the last thing you see from a murderer in the UK. Murderers in the UK, they typically act alone or in very small groups. This is the type of text you would expect to see in a culture that is practically perfectly happy with violence against women. I'm just gonna be honest here. So yes, there are clear problems, Owen. We just need to accept them.
But massive demographic replacement in some of our biggest cities has occurred.
But his prediction was that would cause rivers of blood, like the River Tiber. The streets of Britain would be, rivers of blood would be ahead. That never happened.
No, I didn't say that happened, did I?
And my God, it's one prediction that was wrong. But it wasn't even that wrong. I mean, fine, we don't have open warfare on the streets of Britain. I mean, alright, we did in Leicester, and luckily it didn't end up in any death. But is anything going to be done to make sure that there's no deaths in the future and that there's no more clashes like this? No, of course there isn't, because it would be considered racist.
What I said is some of what he predicted came true. So I do think he was right in some things in that sense. Some cities are no longer diverse. They are no longer diverse in the sense that there isn't a mix of cultures, where it's now been completely replaced by one culture over another.
Like where?
A lot of boroughs of London where the white working classes have been moved out in exchange for a lot of people from
What do you mean they've been moved out?
I mean, come on, give him a bit of a break here. When he says moved out, he obviously doesn't mean that the government literally forced them out of their homes to be replaced by foreigners. But he is effectively saying that they were gentrified. It is a gentrified area, except it's with foreigners rather than with the upper classes.
Well, a lot of the council estates in central London now, in some of those boroughs, have been completely demographically changed to a completely alien culture to what it would have been 50 years ago.
But what do you mean an alien culture? I mean, in East End London, it used to be very Jewish, and now it's more Muslim. But
what do you mean an alien culture? It changed from one culture that was there for a few hundred years, and now it's a completely different culture. What do you mean alien? You've just answered your own question, Owen.
That's always been the case.
So,
I mean, that's
a very alien culture to what it was then, isn't it?
Just a great answer from this guy. Absolutely incredible scenes.
No, I mean, they're British Muslims.
Now, the thing with Owen is that when he says British Muslims, all he really means is a Muslim person who lives in Britain and knows English. But the thing is that most people in the world speak English as a second language, so just knowing English obviously doesn't make you British. In fact, it's more than likely makes you American.
Yes, but it's an alien culture.
What do you mean?
It's a different culture.
Alien culture means
Alien as in unfamiliar.
Yeah, but it's not alien to being British. Being British means you could be Muslim or Jewish or Hindu.
I mean, this is part of the problem with the whole thing, and part of the problem that people are having. England is mostly atheist at this point, but the atheists take Richard Dawkins as a great example. He still wants the Christian history. And it is very much having your cake and eat it too. Now, I can completely understand that you can't force yourself to believe something, but you can fake it until you make it. You're not going to keep that Christian tradition if you don't go to church. That's just a very basic thing you have to do. And then the problem is that obviously a new religion has come in, and because atheism has a complete lack of religion, it's just opened the door for all of these different religions to come in, for churches to be converted into mosques or Hindu temples or whatever, and that is incredibly alien to most people in the United Kingdom. And yes, we've had mosques and Hindu temples since the 19th century, but they were very isolated and localised. I think the first mosque was in Liverpool. but it's just been exploding recently. People are noticing and people don't like it, and it is perfectly fine to realise that your culture is changing and be uneasy about it. A lot of people are.
I'm not saying it's to being British. I'm saying it's to the culture of the area, to the beliefs and belief structures of the area, to the institutions that once were there, being replaced by new institutions now, and new beliefs and new ideologies and new cultures and new religions.
Well, they're different
completely
religions, of
changing
course,
it.
But yeah.
Again, 90s, noughties vibes that Owen Jones is just secreting here. I have no idea why he thinks that being of a different religion would not mean being of a different culture. The whole point of religions is that they give you the moral frameworks and that the cultures develop from there. Obviously, if you have a different religion, and a religion, by the way, that is incredibly hostile to other religions, obviously you are going to have issues there.
But a religion is an entire cultural and ideological
But
outlook on the world.
There's still white working class people who live there who go to school with people from different backgrounds, and they mix with people from different backgrounds. They're not monocultures. You still have white working class people in Tower Hamlets.
Yes, but Owen, do you think you're going to have white people in Tower Hamlets forever? It's been on a very steady decline for the past few decades, and nothing is being done really to try and curb that. And believe it or not, that is a lot of people's problem, Owen.
I'm talking about whether or not the native people in those areas feel that they are now in their homeland, or if their homeland confronts them as something other, something which distracts them from what they believe themselves to be.
Again, perfectly reasonable thing to say. What's your answer going to be, Owen?
Well, I think millions of people are actually happy with being diverse. I mean, London has huge numbers of mixed relationships where people from different cultures quite literally set families up together. I mean, that's a good thing, surely.
I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's neither here nor there. Diversity is not inherently good, it's not inherently bad, that's not my point.
Well, it's just a great answer. The conversation's entirely about, do people of their homelands have the right to self-determination? Do they have the right to close their borders? Owen Jones doesn't think that they do, and he will constantly divert to the Church of Woke to try and claim that, diversity good, which obviously everyone knows just means white people bad. That's all diversity means, a straight white male bad anyway. So the best thing to do is just to get out of that framework. Just say, look, do people, indigenous people, have a right to say what happens in their own homeland? And obviously leftists have to agree with that because they constantly go on about it.
It's inherently good, but
why do you think that?
Because I think you get an interesting exchange of cultures and worldviews, and that makes for a more interesting and dynamic
but why
society.
does a mix of cultures and worldviews provide something good necessarily?
Because we learn from each other.
Yes, but why? Well, let's say there's some archetypal, brilliant worldview, the best possible worldview, right? Would you then say, oh, let's make it more diverse and mix it with other worldviews? No.
I mean, absolutely great answer, yeah. I know I bring a lot of my analogies back to science, but it is because I'm a scientist. But if you had the idea of a round Earth, you don't say, "Oh, let's have a look and let's bring some flat earthers in here. Let's bring their ideas in and try and fit it in with our scientific objective worldview." You're never going to do that because it's completely wrong. And so this guy makes this point, and Owen Jones just ignores it. It just cuts to a completely different conversation.
It's a tough issue, tough question to answer, really.
Owen just doesn't have anything to say about it. Because his presupposition is constantly just diversity good. Why? Because you can learn from each other. Yeah, sure, you can learn from each other. But once again, we're such in an interconnected world, and we've had diversity in Britain for 2 decades at this point, more or less, that we've seen the experiment run, we've seen it go on, we've learned probably all the best things we can from these other cultures. When's it time to stop? Because people are clearly getting fed up with it, obviously me included.
Oh, hey, Rishi. Hi. Rishi, why? Oh, what? Oh.
just instant. No, get out of here. He's got too many places to be. No time for interviews. Go away. It's just incredible. I mean, I could completely understand why Rishi wouldn't want to be doing interviews in the middle of a party conference like this. I mean, he has so many interviews to do, so many places to be. He's probably being briefed as he is walking to his next conference. He's a busy man, so yeah, you can understand why his entourage instantly just got Owen Jones out of there. But let's see what Owen has to say about that.
What a shame.
Yep, just what a shame, with a little smirk on his face as in, oh look, I'm too dangerous for him to talk to. When in reality, the Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland obviously has much bigger fish to fry. Anyway, after this point, Owen Jones does his own little final conclusion, and it's basically the same things that he's been saying throughout. There's an identity crisis in the Conservative Party. When asked what have they achieved in the last decade or so. People's answers range from very basic things such as, gay marriage, i.e. things that Labour were going to do anyway, or it's people like me saying, well, they've really not done that much good. They'll say the same thing as the other people, or they brought gay marriage in, and so they may as well have just been having Labour for the last 13 years. So anyway, I thought this was quite informative for getting quite the insight into what people think in the Conservative Party. As you can see, this is what I've been saying quite a lot, actually. Members of the Tory Party, actually relatively based. And obviously with the MPs that Owen Jones targeted, i.e. people that he would deem his enemy, obviously somewhat based too. Lee Anderson, quite liked his answers. But then you get onto Eric Pickles and it's just deer in the headlights. It's just total confusion, answering like a typical old school politician. And not the greatest fan of that, but still an interesting insight. So anyway, that's everything I had for you today. So once again, thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.